Hello Year 10 and welcome to week 2 of your home study. This is your English language work and it is the dreaded A word, I'm afraid, but panic not, you have until the 20th of April to complete this task, although if you're anything like me you'd probably want to get it out of the way before your Easter holidays. So our learning objective is to plan and write convincingly for a specific genre, audience and purpose. And this is in preparation for English Language Paper 2, Question 5, which we have practiced before, so do not worry. This is what the task is asking you to do, and it might be worth you jotting this down in your exercise books or in your Word document. So, your local newspaper printed the following statement from a reader. The coronavirus should be taken seriously. It costs lives, schools should be shut, festivals banned, and sporting events postponed. Write a letter to your local newspaper arguing whether you agree or disagree with this statement. So for this task, it's worth 40 marks. 24 of those are for content and organisation, and 16 is for technical accuracy. And you're always advised to plan your response before you actually write it. That's in any exam. So if you need to write that down somewhere to help you to process it, pause the video and do that now. The next question you might have is, why on earth would anyone bother to write a letter to the editor of a newspaper? And here are some reasons. So sometimes people write letters because it gives them the opportunity to reach a larger audience. If your letter gets published in a newspaper, then obviously hundreds, thousands of people might be reading it. The newspapers are often read by elected officials, which means that your opinions can be read by someone that could have the power to affect change. You can address information that isn't brought up in the news article, and it can create an impression of widespread support for or against an issue. So there's a range of reasons why people might want to do this. The next part we need to tackle are the features of a letter, and remember you're able to pause this video at any point if you'd like to jot some information down. At the top here on every slide I've just put the task so that we can keep it focused. So features of a letter. First thing you need to do is write your address on the top right hand side, and underneath it goes the date in full. On the left hand side, underneath the date, is the recipient's details, so their name and their address as well. Now you'll see my first error here, because it quite clearly states here that you're writing to a local newspaper and I've done mine addressed to the Times editor, falling at the first hurdle. Underneath their details, you always start with Dear, and if you know their name, Mr. Witherow, followed by a comma. If you don't, then To Whom It May Concern or Dear Sir or Madam is perfectly acceptable as well. After that, leave a paragraph, indent it, and start by saying, I'm writing to you because. That sentence starter gives you the opportunity to have a really clear opening to your letter. If you need to pause the video, do so now. The other thing we need to be thinking about when doing a question 5 task for paper 2 is what sort of persuasive features we can include. So I've put a list here on the PowerPoint in front of you. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it just gives you some things to think about. So you could include alliteration, an anecdote, repetition, rhetorical question, the power of 3, imperative sentences, facts and statistics, hyperbole, emotive language, and inclusive pronouns. If you're not sure about any of those, Google them or email me. Again, you may want to jot these down so that they're fresh in your head. So on these slides, I'm going to give you an idea of the sort of thing you could be writing when you're planning and writing your own response. So for your introduction, you should be thinking about why you're writing to the editor, which is obviously to argue your views on this statement, and what your views actually are and why. Here's one I made earlier. I'm writing to you in response to a statement made by one of your readers on 10th of March 2020. They quite rightly suggested that COVID-19 should be taken seriously and highlighted the inevitability that it costs lives. This educated person was clearly ahead of the curve in response to the dangers of the COVID-19 crisis, and yet, as a country, we still appear to be unprepared for this unprecedented pandemic. Whilst we can all agree that, as suggested by your learned reader, schools are now shut to the vast majority, festivals are now banned, and sporting events have now been postponed, it seems as though some members of the public are still failing to face facts about this issue. I had no idea how much alliteration I'd included in that until this moment. It might be useful for you to just pause this, have a look through, see where I've included techniques. Next is your first main paragraph, and for me, I'm going to address the argument that they made about schools here, and I'm going to present my own case. Schools have long been known to be a cesspit of harboured germs. Never before have children been so keen to wash their hands. Only weeks before, students were happy to eat their packed lunches mere inches away from toilet cubicles. This change in behaviour reveals great progress. However, this is still not adequate. I was relieved at the government's decision to close schools to most students. It's wiser, it's safer, it's the right call. It is of course crucial that all students have access to a decent education, but it makes sense to do it from the safety of their own homes. Again, you may want to pause here to reread that, have a look and see where I've included techniques, ambitious vocabulary, that sort of thing. The next main paragraph, I might mention festivals and sporting events because that's what they mentioned in their statement, so I'm making sure I'm responding to the task properly. In my limited experience, the majority of the public has conceded that festivals and sporting events should be cancelled, for the time being. However, there appear to be some self-involved millennials complaining that they now won't get to see Stormzy or watch Chelsea lose yet another match. This is a global pandemic. Now is not the time to be whinging about how it was going to be Salah's best season yet. Hopefully we can anticipate an extraordinary array of musical and sporting events to take place once normality resumes. For the time being, let's embrace the options we do have. Listen to music online. Watch old concerts back for nostalgia's sake. Read up on the offside rule so you can finally get involved in conversations with football fanatics. At this point I need to pause because I definitely have to Google a footballer. Such is my limited knowledge. Embarrassing. Finally, I'm going to be talking about the idea of lockdown. So whilst the majority of the country who have been in lockdown for nearly a week, there are still some people who feel exempt from this rule. Who are these selfish individuals? Our NHS workers are risking their health every single day to protect our society, and some people can't even comply with basic requirements. Reports have been flying in of groups of teenagers socialising in fields and having barbecues, as though this was some sort of early holiday rather than a global pandemic. Which part of social distancing is unclear. It's selfish, it's irresponsible, and it's downright disgusting. So here I've included a lot of emotive language, some rhetorical questions. It might also be useful for you to critique what I've done as well. If some of the sentences come across as clumsy, consider why that is and how you would improve it. The next bit is my conclusion, so this is the final attempt to argue your viewpoint and persuade your audience to agree with you. Ultimately, this is etiology, not rocket science. For most people, the immediate risk of becoming seriously ill from the virus that causes COVID-19 is thought to be low. However, this does not mean that we can simply become complacent. The rules are there for a reason, and it's our responsibility as members of a civilised society to comply. The vast majority of the public is adapting in this challenging and unprecedented time. It is absolutely imperative that all individuals resolve to stay home, protect the NHS, and save lives. Just looking back at that, I can already see that I've not really included a variety of sentences. All of my sentences are quite long and rambling. In order to engage your reader, you need to vary your sentence types, include some short sentences in there as well. Otherwise, it gets a bit arduous to read. So, how do we finish a letter? If you know them and have used their name, so I did earlier with Mr. Worthington or whoever I said, you sign off by saying yours sincerely, followed by your name underneath. If you don't know them, and you might have started it off by saying to whom it may concern, and you don't know what their real name is, you end it with yours faithfully. And sometimes, for a letter to the editor, it's conventional to put your location at the bottom too. So here's my example underneath. And because I'm delightful, here's what the finished product should look at. So up here, would help if I use the mouse, I've got the address and the date, their address, the salutation, my introduction, 3 main paragraphs conclusion, and my sign off. And that's what the finished product would look like. Obviously, I've made mine ridiculously small so that I can fit it onto one page and screenshot it, but in reality it's quite detailed. This is the slide you might want to use when crafting your own response. So I would maybe pause it here, screenshot it, and use this in order for you to structure your written task here. And I've basically summarised all the information I've given you in the rest of the presentation. And I've included these things like persuasive techniques, other factors that you must consider. One more thing to note is that this is the mark scheme that I will be using to mark your work. So this is AO5 and this is for your content and organisation. So what you're actually writing it, any techniques you include, and your paragraphing. This is the top band. Over here it's technical accuracy, so that's looking at your spag and your vocabulary choices. And again, this is top band. What I would like you to do once you've finished writing it, or typing it, is email it to me at my email address here. And obviously if you're working out of your exercise book, that's absolutely fine. Just take a quick photo and you can email it to me here as well. Finally, if you are feeling overwhelmed with the amount of work, please get in touch with me. I know that this is a really difficult time for everyone to adjust to, and I don't want you to feel like you've got too much going on. So if this is too much, please just talk to me and I'm happy to help. Take care, everyone.